Thank you very much. As Cameron said, I'm an attorney. I represent local government, so I've done so since I got out of law school in 1979, so it's been a long time. My clients are cities, towns, metro townships, the league. This is what I do. There's several attorneys in the room that I've noticed that probably know as much or more than I do about this. The difference is, you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer. It may not be right, it may not be the best answer, but it'll be an answer right now. It won't be one of those where let me look and I'll get back to you. And so with that in mind, if I say something that your local attorney disagrees with, or later you ask them and they say, nah, that's not right, take their answer over mine. I've been asked to address several things, but whenever I do a presentation, I'm willing to take questions when they arise, right when they arise. So raise your hand, ask your question when it occurs to you. It's not going to throw me off my presentation. You're going to notice I don't have a PowerPoint that will get out of order. I'm not going to get lost in my script. I want to answer your questions as you think they're relevant at the time you think they're relevant. The only thing I ask is identify which entity you're from, because my answer depends on the context. And that's because we're the same in some ways in this room, but we're also different. Let me just tell you a little bit about municipalities, about cities, towns, townships, where they stand in the world. God didn't create these. This isn't something that is set out in the United States Constitution. You guys are creatures of the state of Utah Constitution, which says that the legislature has to pass a body of law allowing citizens to organize as municipalities. And you're creatures of the Utah Municipal Code, which is written by the state legislature. Your powers, duties, form, and functions are laid out by the state legislature. They can change it. They can add to your powers, they can take away from the powers. They can define the type of government that you have, how you're set up. Currently in the state of Utah, we have, depending on how you count them, 4 basic forms of municipal government. All of you in this room are in one of these forms. We have what they sometimes call the strong mayor form, the council mayor form of government. We have the manager council form of government. We have the 5-member council form of government. We have the 6-member council form of government. And in Salt Lake County, for various areas, we have what they call the metro township form of government. So that's 5 if you count them as 5. It may be only 4 depending on you count them. And they're all similar in some ways on powers and duties, and they're slightly different. I'm going to talk about those similarities and those differences, and we'll answer your questions on your form, function, and how you're set up. But first, let me talk about why you exist at all, because this is important. Cameron mentioned growth. You raised your hands on growth. We're going to talk about growth. I read in the newspaper or heard on the news 2 or 3 weeks ago that Utah's net growth in the last year was just under 60,000 people. That's the city the size of Layton. Every year in the state of Utah, we have to accommodate a city the size of Layton. Who does that? Who's in charge of that? You are. You may be pro-growth, you may be anti-growth. The fact is, local government is the government that's been tasked with bringing those 60,000 new people a place to live, bringing them clean water, taking the dirty water away, giving them safe roads, making sure that when they have a problem and they call 911, someone shows up. That's what we do. Nobody else does it for them. Those 60,000 people every year are relying on you to see that that happens. We are the government of service. We're basically there to provide those basic municipal services that people cannot provide for themselves. Lots of communities were incorporated around the idea is we need a water system. Lots of communities were incorporated around the idea we need better police protection. Lots of communities were incorporated around the idea that we need sewer, we need septic, we need control. First and foremost, the reason why cities, towns, municipal government exists is to provide municipal type services. The second reason we exist is to protect and preserve the sense of community. Not every community in the state of Utah has chosen to incorporate, by the way, over the years. Morgan County has one incorporated city, Morgan. It has many lovely communities. You've got Stoddard and Peterson and Mountain Green, the other enterprise as we call it. All lovely little communities that have been there, many of them, for as long as Morgan. But they never chose to incorporate. Morgan chose to incorporate. Your groups, your township, your town, your city, at some time in the past chose to incorporate. They did that because there was a desire to protect and preserve that sense of community. Harriman didn't exist until the late 80s in Salt Lake County. They incorporated because they didn't want to be Riverton. Somebody once said that West Point, I think it's not West Point, it's probably Hooper, should have been named Not Roy. And that's fine. They wanted to protect and preserve that sense of community. You can't find Central anymore. Lark is gone. Union no longer exists because they didn't incorporate. Everyone needs a hometown, a place to be from, a place to go home to. You guys are in charge of protecting and preserving that. The Kearns Metro Township Board is sitting back there. They're going to keep Kearns Kearns and make it a place that people can be proud of to call home. I was raised in Murray. I spent 20 years in Salt Lake City. I was born in Panguitch. I live in South Jordan. I still consider Murray home. I look to see if the Murray High School football team won. I have nothing, no other connection, but that it's my hometown and I worry about it. I trust that the Murray City Council will preserve that Murray as a hometown. My parents spent most of their life in Murray. When my dad retired, he moved home to Panguitch. Someone in Panguitch took the time to protect and preserve Panguitch so he could go home to it. That's what you're in charge of doing, is to protecting and preserving that sense of community. Or if you're a new community, building that sense of community. Vineyard's here. Vineyard is building a new community in the middle of Utah County. They're building that community feel. That's why we hold festivals. That's why we spend money on parades. That's why we have summer parties, to build the hometown for our kids. The last reason communities exist is we're government. We want to be in charge. If somebody's going to zone us, we want to zone us. If somebody's going to write the laws on dogs, it should be us. In my mind, that's the third and least important reason why you exist. The most important is we provide services. We provide an area for those 60,000 new people to live. We provide a way to get the police to their front door when they need the police, and the dirty water away when they need it to disappear. When it rains hard, we're in charge of making sure they don't get flooded. That's what we do primarily. Secondly, we build communities. We build that sense of place. The third and least is we're government. We tell people what to do. We tell them how to do it. So let me tell you how you do it. First, the difference in the forms of government. The mayor-council form of government is a form of government that mimics the state and federal system. You have two branches, an executive branch, a legislative branch. The mayor is the head of the executive branch. Council members are legislators only. You are only in that form of government if at some time your voters have held an election and chosen that form of government. Murray's here, Murray is in that form of government. Those that have that form of government in Utah are Logan, Ogden, Marriott-Slaterville, Salt Lake City, South Salt Lake City, Taylorsville City, Murray City, Sandy City, Provo City. I may have missed one, West Jordan City. They've held an election to change it, but they're still in that form of government. While everybody but townships right now may have a mayor, and everybody has a council, not everybody is in the mayor-council form of government. If you're not in one of those cities, you're not in the mayor-council form of government. Does anybody here think they are and they have a question about it that I might miss their city? Yes?
Isn't Eagle Mountain?
Eagle Mountain is not that form of government. Eagle Mountain is a 6-member council form of government that it'll talk about. Anybody else got a question about one of their cities? Yes?
Heber City.
Heber City is not in that form of government. Heber City is in the 6-member council form of government. Mayor-council form of government, branches of government, separate government. The mayor is not the chair of the council. The mayor does not sit on the council in the mayor-council form of government. The mayor has a veto. The mayor gets to attend council meetings, can speak if called on by the chair of the council. The council chooses their own chair. Council members in the council and the mayor-council form of government are by statute legislators only, can have no administrative functions, can have no executive powers. The mayor's side has the complete executive and administrative functions. It mimics the state and federal system. It only exists if your voters held an election to choose that form, and it is described by the state legislature in the municipal code, the powers and duties. Now there are some things that you can, around the edges in those cities, they can have administrative codes and slightly different, but basically their constitution is the municipal code. Okay, the 6-member council form of government, that's the form of government that most cities and towns in the state of Utah have. That form of government is what I call, or others have called, the traditional form of local government. There are no branches of government. It is government by committee. It's like the old city commissions, county commissions, school boards, sewer district boards. You have a mayor who chairs that committee. You have council members. The mayor does not have a veto. The mayor in the 6-member council form of government has a vote on certain issues. That mayor can vote in cases of a tie and on certain issues dealing with the power of the mayor that I'll talk about later. Most cities and towns in Utah are in the 6-member council form of government. The 5-member council form of government is the old traditional town form of government. The 5-member council form is similar to the 6-member with this exception. There's only 5 members on the council, one of whom is the mayor. In the 5-member council form of government, the mayor has a vote on every issue. Township form of government, metro townships, 5 members, one of which is a chair. I know they're going to run a bill this year to try to change that name to mayor. 5-member council, they're all voting members of the council. The chair has certain executive and administrative powers, similar to a mayor in the 5-member council form and the 6-member council form of government. Now there is an old legacy form of government that is still around. It is called the city manager form. That form mimics the corporate system. There are a lot of people around who think government ought to be run like a business. Well, that government was created for people like that. The city manager form of government is a form that West Jordan has now, but is changing from. West Valley has, Orem has, Bryan Head Town, Holiday City, Cottonwood Heights City. I may be missing one there. In that form, as I say, it mimics the corporate system. You have the mayor is a member of the council. The mayor chairs the council. The mayor votes on all issues. The mayor is a ceremonial mayor only, has no administrative powers, no executive powers, and they hire a chief executive officer. So it's like the board of directors of a corporation. Shareholders choose the board, board chooses the CEO. The city manager, the CEO, has all of the executive and administrative powers. Now that form, the city manager form, is no longer available in that strict form to any city because the legislature took it out of the municipal code in 2008. But the cities that had it are still in that form. Anybody here from West Valley City? Well, they know that form of government there well. Cottonwood Heights, Holiday. Now, just like the council mayor form, just like the 6-member council form, lots of cities have city managers. Just like most cities have a mayor. But not all city managers are the same. The city manager in the old legacy city manager form of government is different from the city manager that you may have in Heber City or the city manager they have in Park City, or even a city administrator or city manager they have in a mayor-council form of government. The difference is this. Those city managers' powers and duties are set by the state legislature. The council can't change them. The council can't get rid of the position. The council just has to hire the city manager, and then the city manager's in charge. In those city manager cities, the mayor is a ceremonial mayor only. Kisses babies, cuts ribbons, goes to meetings, has no power, except votes on the council. Any questions about that? Yes?
I want to go back to the township. You mentioned that the legislator wants to change the co-chair to mayor. In that case, would there be an election?
Well, I don't know. I haven't read the bill, but I think that's the idea, is that people, and Jen there from the Immigration Canyon Metro Township, very nice people because they let me come to their meetings at times. Right now, the Metro Townships can only exist in Salt Lake County, only exist if people voted to create them. And right now, the councils in the Metro Townships elect their chair, and they do that whenever they want to. I know there's a bill being run to change that to mayor, and I think the bill is going to say people will run in the Metro Townships for the position of mayor, just like they do in a town. They'll make it more like a town and less like a school board where they choose their chair. Yes?
So the mayor of Heber City is a ceremonial mayor?
Good question. No. And the reason why it's a good question is this. In the 5-member council form of government and the 6-member council form of government and the Metro Township council form in some ways, with some limitations, what the legislature has done is said this, in effect. We recognize as a legislature that where there's 247 cities and towns out there, they're all different. Some are very small, some are very large. Some of the small ones in population, like Park City, are really big ones because of the number of people that are there. And some of the big ones are really, that exist out there that might belong to the Unified Police and the Unified Fire and be in a sewer district and be in, and not provide their own power, are really act like small cities, even though they got a large population. They're not running a lot. There's a wide variety, a wide variation between these 6-member council and 5-member council forms of government. So the legislature has done what I call, it's just set the default parameters. The legislature describes the 6- and 5-member council form of government, and they say, all right, starting out as a default position, the mayor in the 6-member council form of government is the chief executive and the chief administrative officer. So the municipal code would say the mayor of Heber City, is an excellent example, is the chief administrative officer, the chief executive officer. The mayor also chairs the council. The mayor has a vote. Same in the 5-member council form of government. That's the default position that they start out in. And then the legislature says, yes.
Did you say the mayor has a vote?
The mayor has a vote in cases of a tie and on certain issues.
Only on a title.
Yeah.
Okay.
The mayor is a legislator as well as a council member. And that's significantly different. The mayor of Salt Lake City has a veto but not a vote. Mayor of Murray here has a veto but not a vote on the council. Okay, so 5-member council form, 6-member council form, we start that way. The legislature says, all right, with a blank slate, this is the way we start. And then the legislature gives options to you in the 5- and 6-member council form of government that you can exercise at a local level. So you think of it like this. You go out and you buy a new iPad. You turn it on, and somebody in Cupertino, California, or China has already set up a whole bunch of stuff. And if you have the authority, or if you have the wits, or the wherewithal, or a 10-year-old son, you can change those default settings. You can remove things, you can add things, you can take things away. That's what the legislature did for you 5- and 6-member council forms of government. So it said, we're going to give you the authority that if you want to have a position like city manager, you can have one. That if you want to be like a small town and give your council members administrative powers over departments, you can do that. If you want, like Eagle Mountain, to have the mayor run the show like a strong mayor form of government, you can do that. We are going to give you the option to set it up within these broad parameters any way you want on a local decision-making level. But the question then is, who has the 10-year-old brain to make those changes? Who has the power to do it? So the legislature has said this. In a 6-member council form of government, if in 2008, when they last changed it, you had an ordinance that created the position of city manager or city administrator, that ordinance remains in effect. If a council wants to amend that ordinance and get rid of the city administrator or city manager's position, they can do so in either one of two ways. With the consent of the mayor's vote, and a majority of the remaining council, or with a unanimous council over the objection of the mayor. If a 6-member or 5-member council form of government wanted to change and didn't have a city manager, didn't have a city administrator, and wanted to add one, take power from the mayor and give it to some individual or give it to council members, they can do so with the mayor's consent, the mayor's affirmative vote, and a majority of the council, or a unanimous council. So it's very straightforward if you understand it. You guys are elected and have been given a used iPad. Someone has changed the default settings when you come into office. It's not a clean slate. Now, we have 2 new cities starting this year, Bluff down in southern Utah, Cedar Highlands down in southern Utah, different sides of the state. They have a clean slate. They get to decide. You guys have taken office and some previous council has set up in your 6 and 5-member council forms of government has already set up your administrative procedures and process. You have the power to change that if you want to, but only if the mayor's on board or you have a unanimous council. Without those things, it remains the way it's written. So to answer your question on Heber City, I know you have a city manager ordinance. You have a city manager. That ordinance is unique to you guys, gives him certain powers and duties, leaves certain powers and duties with the mayor, gives council members certain role. That stays in effect until it's changed. If you want to change it and give the mayor more power, you need the mayor to vote yes and 3 council members to vote yes. If you don't have that, it doesn't get changed unless you've got 5 council members, a unanimous council. Now that gets a little complicated. It's simple in my respect. You come into office, if you want to change the way things have done in the past in the 6 and 5-member council form of government, if you want to change who's in charge on the day-to-day affairs in the 6 and 5-member council form of government, you need the mayor on board and 3 council members, or you need a unanimous council, 5 council members. or in the case of the 5-member council, 4 council members over the mayor's objections. Any questions about that? Yes. What city?
Interlaken.
Interlaken, a relatively new city 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know what choices you made. I don't think you have a city manager, though.
No city manager. However, in a 5-council legislation.
Yeah, mayor and 4 council members.
Yep. Can the council change the way that the planning commission is set up? We don't have a large pool of volunteers.
Yes, the answer is this, and that's an excellent question. Many planning commissions are if you're going to be in the land use control business, which all of you want to be, you have to have a planning commission. The legislature says that you will adopt an ordinance that creates the planning commission. That ordinance gets to set the number, the terms, how they're appointed. In theory, you could have a planning commission of 50 or a planning commission of 1. After more than 30-something years in this business, I'm praying for the day when some city says, hey, we've decided we're going to have a planning commission consisting of 1 planning commissioner. A wise person who knows this. The meetings would go so much quicker and everything. And then if I was in charge, I'd appoint my planner as the planning commissioner. I mean, that'd save the argument between the planning commission and the planners. But anyway, most of you have a planning commission of 5. It's hard to get 5 in Interlaken.
Oh yeah, we're lucky to get 2.
Yeah, so you can have 3 if you want. No, the council shouldn't do it too. You got to have a separate body. And Meg will talk about that later, I think. The idea is this, and let me just say this briefly so you understand the role of planning commissioners as opposed to the council. The reason why you have to have a planning commissioner is that telling people what they can and can't do in their backyard is seen as being a very intrusive thing to do. And so they've said we don't trust politicians to do that. Politicians have to run for office. They're going to be subject to the whims of voters. Voters don't care about other people's rights. They only care about their own property. And so if we're going to allow politicians to make land use decisions, we're going to require them to have a panel of experts appointed to advise them on these decisions, to make recommendations. So in theory, the Planning Commission was intended to be not the voice of the people. That's who gets elected. It wasn't intended to be the community council. It wasn't intended to be the people who protect the people from the legislators. The intent of the Planning Commission is that you appoint experts in planning to your Planning Commission who then gives you good advice so you don't violate the laws and screw up things and trample people's rights, and they make recommendations to you before you do that, before you trample the rights and violate the Constitution. And so no, your Planning Commission should not be the same body as your City Council. You should appoint people to a Planning Commission who are experts in planning, and a wide range, if it's going to work the way the legislature and the others think it should work. In truth, planning commissioners have been the place where people volunteer to get because they couldn't get elected and they're planning to get elected later. Yes?
I'm just wondering, so you're saying that the planning commission should not be the same people as the council members?
They should not be.
Okay.
Okay, so that's your basic form function of government. The key is this: council members have been given one thing by the voters: your right to sit as a member of a committee and vote. The voters didn't give you any individual power beyond that, just the right to vote. In some of your cities, council members, you've adopted ordinances that give you administrative or executive functions. That's great if you want to have that. It's the common thing to do in small Utah cities and towns especially, places where they can't afford a city manager or city administrator. Members of the council are appointed over departments. So how many of you here are from a small city or town that have council members over departments? Very common. Your power and authority as a council member department head is defined by your own ordinances, customs, policies, and traditions. Nothing in state law says what power you have. It's all local. Whatever rights you have as a council member, department head, is in your own ordinances and policies. It's a delegation from the mayor to the council members, or it's either the council voting unanimously to take that power from the mayor and give it to yourself. Other than that, what the voters gave you is the right to sit as a member of the committee. You get to vote. You're required to meet at least once a month. You can meet as often as you want. Your quorum in the 6-member council form of government is 3 voting council members. The mayor and 2 is not a quorum. Your quorum in the 5-member council form and the Metro Township council form is 3 council members. Mayor plus 2 is a quorum. Chair plus 2 is a quorum in the townships. 6-member council, mayor and 2 is not a quorum. Minimum vote to get anything done in the 6 and 5-member council form and the township form, 3 yes votes. If 3 council members are present, 2 vote yes, 1 vote no, it does not pass. Minimum vote, so you have 2 things, a minimum vote required and the quorum required. In Murray, 7-member council forms, 5-member council. Yeah. In the mayor council forms, some of them have 7-member council or 5-member councils. Your quorum is a majority of the council. Your minimum vote gets to pass something, 3, 4, yes.
So in a 6-member form of government, when you're putting in an administrator, I'm from Roosevelt, Utah.
Yes.
So would a mayor and 2 councilmen be sufficient?
No, a mayor and 2 is not a quorum. Remember, in the 6-member council, the mayor gets to vote in cases of a tie, and obviously the tie is only going to come up if a council member is missing, or the mayor gets to vote on whether to take power from the mayor and give it to the city manager, or gets to vote on whether to give power back to the mayor if you're getting rid of a city manager, or gets to vote on the hiring and firing the city manager in the 6-member council. The 5-member council form, the mayor votes on every issue. In the township form, the chair votes on every issue. Yes, question over here.
City of Holiday?
Yes. City of Holiday is the city manager form, the old one. Mayor chairs the council. Mayor votes on every issue. Mayor is a legislator only. Ceremonial mayor. 4, you got 7 members?
Well, the city manager doesn't vote.
No, the city manager, how many on the Holiday Council? 5?
There's the mayor and 5. So there's 6 total, but everything requires 4 votes.
Yeah.
Even if we've got 5 sittings and it's a 3.
The member, if you're 6-member council, mayor and 5, you're going to need 4. Your minimum vote is 4. Yeah. And that's what I say, that legacy form, that city manager form, is set out by the old state law that is no longer in the books. You can't have that unless you hold an election. Even if you have a city manager, you're not in that form. You're only in that form if you held a vote. Yes, from Vineyard Town, 115% growth last year. They're solving the housing problem in Utah County right this very minute.
For everyone, right? So why would cities go from a 5 to a 6?
Excellent question. The question was, why would cities go from a 5 to a 6? Back in the old days, when the legislature actually listened to the advice from people outside, your form of government was based on your population. And so towns all had the 5-member council form. When you hit the right population, you automatically became a 6-member council form. The legislature took that out now and said there is no automatic change from 5 to 6. So Harriman, which is a very fast-growing community over the years, still has that form, 5-member council form. Vineyard still has that 5-member council form, even though they're growing form. Why go? The only reason to go is if you want to say we're like a big city and we want another council member. If you go, it takes power away from the mayor because the mayor loses some of the mayor's vote in those forms. But there's no reason to do it. But it used to be automatic. You hit a population level, you change forms of government. Yes?
Eagle Mountain again. We had an interesting thing in our recent election where one mayor declared full-time and the other mayor candidate.
Yeah, Eagle Mountain is very interesting, yeah.
The duties of that mayor change based on whether or not they're full-time or part-time. Can you?
Yeah, let me just clarify this for everybody in the room. All mayors are full-time. They're the mayor 24/7. Some mayors are paid enough to quit their other job. But all mayors are full-time mayors. Eagle Mountain has a very interesting kind of thing that's historically gone. They had, in the past, decided that our mayor is better than our city manager would ever be at running the city, and we no longer need a city manager. We'd like the mayor to do it. So they increased the mayor's salary up and fired their city manager at some time in the past, and that mayor was given a big a salary and ran the day-to-day affairs. And their ordinance laid that out. But they also did another interesting thing. They recognized that when you say the mayor is going to be here all day, every day, and be paid this amount, it limits your pool of applicants for mayor. Because some people don't want to quit their regular jobs to take a 4-year job and then get thrown out of office. So Eagle Mountain has a provision that says when you sign up to mayor, you will indicate to the voters whether you intend to take the salary and be here all day, or you're going to run and not be there. And the voters elect the person, and then whoever gets elected, it changes the relationship between the manager and the mayor. Now, who won this year?
Tom Westmoreland.
Well, so they're going to give him the same salary that Pender, or whatever his name was, had. That's Eagle Mountain's the only one that does that. But everybody's mayor is full-time. And you guys get to choose the level of salary you want to pay them. And if you pay them enough, they'll hang around all day. If you don't want that, you keep the salary low, and then they keep their other jobs. But this deal about some mayors are full-time and some mayors are part-time just drives me nuts, because I can tell you that if the sewer backs up on Sunday night, they're calling the mayor. Whether that mayor's paid a lot of money or is paid nothing, they're still going to get the same calls. Yes, Oakley is a wonderful city because they think I'm their city attorney, even though I've never billed them.
In the 6-member form, the mayor gets to pick his staff. You know, we don't have a city manager, we have a public works director, for example.
Yeah.
And that's all picked in that. We did have somebody on a committee with him picking that. I believe that it said that it's the mayor's responsibility and his choice, but it needs to be, it almost seems like a Supreme Court thing.
Yes, excellent question. The default setting in the state code for the 5- and 6-member council form of government and the metro township form is the same on this, on the mayor's powers of appointment as the strong mayor form, the mayor council form. It says that if they're the certain officers and department head level, the mayor appoints with the advice and consent of the council. In Oakley, that's still that way. Now, in Holiday, the manager appoints with the advice and consent of the council. In some cities, they've changed their ordinances to say the manager appoints department heads with the advice and consent of the council. In some cities, they've got an ordinance that says these are the statutory officers that are appointed by the mayor. Everybody else is hired by the whole council. It's one of those optional things that you can do in your own ordinance. If you don't trust your mayor to be appointing the department heads in Oakley, you could change your ordinances, your policies, and say that, mayor, you can appoint the recorder and you can appoint the treasurer, the statutory officers, but department heads, you don't have that power. They belong with us. If you pass that ordinance, you're going to need either the mayor's yes vote and a majority of the remainder of the council, or you're going to need 4 unanimous over the mayor. But that's just up to you. The default, though, is mayor appoints with advice and consent. Advice and consent means, mayor, we don't like the person you appointed, we say no. It doesn't mean you get to choose your own person. Okay, council members, You do your business in meetings. Open and Public Meetings Act. It applies to all of us. It's very important. The way to think of the Open and Public Meetings Act is this. The policy of the state of Utah is that we have chosen, and by this I say the legislature has chosen it for us, has chosen transparency over efficiency. We could do this work easier and better if we could do it in secret. If we didn't invite the public. I know that's true. Hard decisions are easier to make in back rooms with small groups. That's the reason why the legislature runs the way they do. No hard decision ever gets decided in the public forum up there. It's been decided in a small room by a small group. But that's not your choice. The law in Utah is we've traded efficiency for transparency. Have two basic laws that apply to you that are not optional with you, that can't be changed. They are the Open and Public Meetings Act and the Government Records Access and Management Act. The Open and Public Meetings Act applies to all levels of government, all branches of government, the same way. There's not an act for you and an act for the school districts and an act for that. What it says is this: all meetings of all government bodies are to be open to the public. 100% of all meetings of all government bodies are to be open to the public. So, first question is, what is a government body? They define it in the Act. It is a body that consists of two or more persons that is created by some law, ordinance, resolution, policy that is supported by public funds, that has the power to make decisions in the public interest or make recommendations on those decisions in the public interest. And then it says, but political party caucuses are not public bodies. And there's a couple of other exemptions. That's why the legislature can go into the Republican caucus up there and close it. It's not a public body, it's a political party caucus. So they can make a tough decision in their caucus and then come out and pretend to debate it. So public body's defined. Meeting is defined. Meeting is defined as a convening of the public body by someone who's got authority to convene it for the purposes of that body, that is not a purely social occasion or just a chance get-together. So if someone calls a meeting and you have a quorum present, that's why quorum is important. It is a meeting of the public body. Now let's start taking the questions. Yes. What city?
Bountiful City.
Yes.
A scenario. I send a group text to all the council members that I think we should allow pot-bellied pigs in Bountiful. What ensues is a discussion over text message among council members about whether or not we should allow pot-bellied pigs.
Good question. The Open Public Meetings Act has a policy statement in it, a purpose statement in it. It says it is the policy of the state of Utah that all of your decisions and your deliberations will be taken from a public meeting. And so just based on that and based on the definition we talked about, group text where you're debating in a group text back and forth whether or not you should allow pot-belly stoves, appears to be deliberating, pot-belly pigs, excuse me. Pot-belly stoves we no longer allow because of the air quality, and I'm pissed off at all you burning wood. Pigs you can have, but they don't bother me. But these Traeger guys burning in the middle of the winter are just driving me nuts. Anyway, it would appear that that violates the act because there is a quorum, they're present in some sense, and they're deliberating over an issue. So back in the old, years ago, I would tell you that that's a clear violation and you're cheating. But the legislature then got involved because they also text each other and they also use email and they also do social media and they all do that. And so there is a section now in the Open and Public Meetings Act that says nothing in the act can be construed to be holding it a violation for a member of a public body to be communicating with another member of the public body by using electronic communications outside of the meeting. So I can no longer say that your scenario that you get is a violation of the law. I can say, though, it still violates the spirit of the act, that you shouldn't be deliberating and deciding outside the meeting. But no one can charge you with a crime for doing that anymore. Yes?
So along that same line, a lot of our cities have citizens groups on Facebook and different social...
You know, I've heard of Facebook, but it's never really been part of my life. One of these days I'm going to learn what it is.
Well, we need help with the legal definition of it because there's a citizens page that's not run by the city, and people will ask questions and tag different council members.
And that's why the legislature says that's not a violation of the law anymore, because it's so murky.
So it's not a quorum.
It's not a quorum, it's not a meeting. It says nothing in the act will say that electronic communications outside the meeting is a violation of the act. But it violates, in my mind, it can violate the intent and purpose of the act if you are using that exception to cheat, to deliberate and decide. Yes?
So we're just answering a resident's question?
It's not a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. But in your city, if you want to be tougher than that, if you've adopted policies and procedures or things for your council to not do that, which is perfectly all right, then follow that and don't do it. But it doesn't violate the Open Public Meetings Act. Yes?
If you have a 5-member council and you have 3 people that are duly inconsistent, can you get together as all 5 for a team building exercise?
Sure, you can get together. You just got to be a public meeting.
But I mean, if you're trying to get to know one another, can you do...
If it's purely social, fine. But if it's get together as team building, it's not purely social. There are lots of ways you can cheat. As I said, it would be easier on all of us if we didn't have to follow this. And there are lots of people looking for ways to get around this because it's more efficient, it's better. Let me just tell you, it is easy to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. There's no excuse for not complying with it. All you have to do to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act is give a public notice of your meetings that includes an agenda, the date, time, and place of the meeting, and what's going to go on in there. And then the doors are open, the public gets to come in. You don't have to let them participate. You don't have to let them talk. You don't have to let them vote, interrupt you, do anything. They just get to come and watch you meet. Yes?
I'm Mapleton, I'm newly elected. We have closed door sessions for council. What qualifies to be a closed door session?
A closed door session? Excellent question. All of your meetings are open and public. Some portions of your meetings can be closed to the public for very specific purposes. These are often called executive sessions or closed door meetings. In order to close a portion, and let me just say, no meeting starts as closed. All meetings start as open. The same notice, the same agenda requirements, the same public open door policy, everything. If the topic is all right, meets the standards of state law, and someone makes a motion to close that meeting, executive session, they need to state the reason for it. The reason has to be one outlined in the law, and you need a 2/3 vote of the council or the body to close the meeting. Then you can close the meeting. The things you can close that meeting for are, you can close the meeting to discuss a person, character, competence, mental, physical health. Not to talk about personnel issues, but to talk about an individual person. You can close a meeting to talk about strategy, and this is what Mapleton always closes for because they have more of this than anything. Close a meeting to talk about strategy on pending or reasonably imminent litigation. My law partner is the attorney for Mapleton, and I think that that's just a regular meeting as they have, is to talk about strategy on pending or imminent litigation. You can close the meeting to talk about the strategy on the purchase or sale of real property if the discussion is necessary for you to protect things like appraisals or values and to make sure that you can get the best deal for the public. You can close a meeting to talk about the deployment of security devices. Here's the code to the front door. Here's the password to the computer. You can close a meeting to talk about ongoing criminal investigations. That's it for you guys. There's a list of some other things that don't apply to you at all. But that list is it. And the list is not meant to be descriptive of the types of things you can close it for. The list is meant to be limiting to exactly those things. If it's not one of those things, you can't appropriately close the meeting for it. It's not those things and things like unto them. It's those things in the statute. Yes?
Rob Payne, Immigration Canyon Township. I've heard that all open meetings have to either be recorded or have minutes.
Good question.
As we talk about workshops and things like that, that's a tremendous burden.
Yeah, we have traded efficiency for transparency. Remember that.
True, we do have to have.
The Open and Public Meetings Act, as well as the Municipal Code, also defines the types of records that you have to keep. You must keep written minutes of all of your meetings, of your councils. Those minutes under the Government Records Access and Management Act are public documents, and they have to be kept forever. The Act tells, the Open and Public Meetings Act says the minimum requirements for being put in the minutes, which include the substance of what members say and their actual vote. It doesn't have to be a transcription. It has to be the substance and the actual vote. If you invite a member of the public to speak to you, it has to contain their name and the substance of what they say. You must also record all open public meetings. Those recordings are public documents and have to be made available to the public. Now, the recordings have to be made available to the public within 3 business days after the close of the meeting. The written minutes have to be made available to the public in draft form as soon as they're available to members of the councils. And then they also must be, once they're final form, they have to be uploaded to the state website within a specific time so they're available to the public. No exceptions. All meetings get recordings, all meetings get written minutes. Closed meetings, the recording is not a public document. Closed meetings, if you're talking about a person or the deployment of security devices, you can dispense with the actual recording and your chair can sign an affidavit saying, I swear we only talked about a person, or I swear we only talked about the deployment of security devices. Now that makes sense if you think about it. Who wants to have a recording around when you're standing around talking about what a crappy attorney David Church is? Eventually someone will listen to that and tell me, and then I'll get my feelings hurt. Or you don't want to have a recording around that has the combination to the safe on it. That doesn't make any sense. Yes?
In regards to the email chain or the electronic communication, is that subject to GRAMA as well?
Yeah. Let me just say it depends. Most likely, GRAMA is the Government Records Access and Management Act. It basically says that all documents that you create have to be classified as public, private, protected, or controlled. It defines those classifications. Almost everything that you do, whether electronic or in writing, will be defined as a document. If it is a document, it's in one of those classes. The default class is public. Public documents get disclosed. Now, I say that because when you say text, some texts are not public records. Some texts are private records. It depends on who owns the phone and who pays for it in the system. But the key on text, emails, and all that, whether they're owned by the government or owned by somebody else, remember, they're all going to be subject to discovery in litigation. And so that's a whole different deal, whether the lawyers can get it when they sue you. But text gets very, very difficult. Now, Bart asked the question. He's the most powerful non-elected official in Salt Lake County now, because he's running the municipal services district for all those townships. He's a bigger dog than, even though he doesn't know it, he's a bigger dog than old Mayor McAdams, who's just a county guy. Anyway, Bart, what's the question?
During a meeting, you talked about electronic communications outside of the meeting.
Excellent question. It is a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act for you guys to communicate with each other during the meeting by text, electronic email, that kind of thing. The law clearly says outside a meeting can't be a violation, inside a meeting is. Now you think that's funny. Well, who would do that? All of you. I mean, we hand out these phones and these iPads, and you got the guy on one end and the other guy on the other, and they're going like this, how you going to vote? I was in a meeting once, I won't say where, doing a wonderful presentation. And I always have my phone with me in my pocket, and you know how it is, and I feel the thing vibrate. And I look down at it, and some council member has texted me that my fly is down. Now, what good is that information to me? I'm rolling along, giving a presentation. What am I going to do now? Look down, turn around? Completely inappropriate, and I can see why the law says you shouldn't do that. Now, I was in another meeting at a place, a big room like this, hotly contested, public hearing, everything's going smoothly, and man, we got this sucker greased. You know, and we've got the votes, and it's going to go, and it's just a matter of getting through the hearing and getting beat up, and then we're going to do it. And the mayor starts talking. And man, he goes on, and he goes on, and on. And I'm standing at the back of the room, and I feel my phone buzz, and I look down, and a council member saying, "Is there any legal way we can get this guy to shut up?" Yeah. Yes?
Highland City, what about electronic, they are proposing to do electronic voting via our phones, where it comes up like it's called a Jackbox link. Is there any problem with that? Like, now just doing a lot more electronic that way.
Well, yeah, as long as it's a public vote and in the record, you can use technology, you can hold electronic meetings, you can, as it talk about in Highland, have a system where they're pushing yes or no. Now, let me just say, if there's a roll call vote required in state laws, there isn't something, you're going to, you know, the public needs to know how people vote. So if it's a way to hide your vote from the public, you can't do it. You have to vote in public in front of them. Yes?
Woods Cross. So I have a question. I'm newly elected to the council, and I've been spending time with each employee. So with information and feedback that I'm getting from the employees, how do I have to relay that in a public meeting, or?
Well, you could do it one-on-one with your other council members, or you could do it if it's not the kind of thing that where you're talking about character, competency, mental, physical health, you can do it in public. If it's one of those other things, if you say, look, I've been meeting with these employees, and I've got some comments that, you know, the public works director wants to complain about the water superintendent's character, then you'd have a motion in the meeting to close it. If you get the vote from a supermajority, you can close it and you go in the meeting. Now, the important thing is, when you're in the closed meeting, you're limited to those topics. Don't cheat. I've been in literally hundreds of closed meetings. I've been in literally hundreds of closed meetings where after we talk about the topic, then we go on to something else that we'd really like to discuss. Don't do that. Don't be holding these meetings in the parking lot after the meeting. Yes?
Sandy City. We're exploring live streaming our council meetings. Can you just kind of briefly comment on that trend, and if there's been any adverse reaction to that in some of the cities we've seen?
No, they're live streaming for the public your council meetings. Is that what I heard? Yeah, Kaysville does that. Other people do it. It's easy to do now. It's cheap, the YouTube thing. I'm in favor of it. Keeps the public attendance at the meetings, increases public participation, keeps them from showing up. They can watch you. And the number one benefit of it, it's the same benefit I saw after they started recording things. If you saw how stupid some of you look, you'd say less in those meetings. So I'm in favor of live streaming. It's also helped with the way people dress. And it keeps the public better. If they go home and say, look how good I looked on YouTube when I was complaining, and then they pull up that YouTube thing and see how they really look, you know that. So no, I think it's a good trend. I think we ought to do it. I think it's helpful. Transparency over efficiency is the goal. We want the public to watch us. We want them to get trust in us. The more they watch, the more they participate by showing up, the better it is. They see you're not crooks. They see you're not idiots. They see that what you're there to do is to provide services and to build communities. That you're not there just to push people around and to tell them how many dogs they can own. That it's a bigger thing than that. So yeah, it's a good idea. Yes?
Well, City of Woodland Hills, so you talked about electronic communications in the meetings. Is that only between the elected officials? Like what if I'm sitting in a meeting and a citizen texts?
Don't take it. The question is citizens texting, lobbyists texting during the meeting. To me, that's just plain rude. You know, if someone wants to text you, you can't stop them from doing it. But this is my advice to you. During the meeting, turn off your phone. You know, turn off your email, turn off your text. Why are you letting somebody who knows you're texting sit in the audience and start lobbying you on what you should do? You know? It just, unless you're going to share it with the rest of the council, so-and-so out there has texted me this important information. But it's up to you on that. Yes?
White City, on the closed door meeting portion of it, you mentioned that people can do a two-thirds vote to go in closed session.
Yeah.
But what I recommend from my years of experience is that they should, you know ahead of time if you're going to have an issue related to those 4 subject matters. So those should be agended. You don't give the specifics, but you can either, we do a line for personnel if necessary, a line for property, a line for security, and so forth. And if necessary, we have that available.
Yeah, let me just say, a lot of clerks and recorders, if you know that there's a potential for a closed door meeting, it's polite to put on your agenda so the public would know that there may be a closed door meeting. That's the polite thing if you know it. A lot of clerks and reporters have started to include at the bottom of every agenda, some or all of them may be closed. I don't think that adds anything. I also, as an attorney, do not think it is required that it be on the agenda, that it be closed door before you can close it. And let me give you an example. You might have on your agenda the item, and you don't know that it's going to be controversial. It may just say, appoint David Church city attorney. And you get to that part, and everybody thinks it's going to go smoothly because, hey, you know. And someone says, before we vote on this, before we accept the mayor's recommendation, I move we go into a closed meeting because I want to talk about his character. And then you hold a vote to do that, and that's would be appropriate, even though nobody anticipated it. Because you may have something to say that you can't or don't want to say in public that meets that. If that comes up, that's perfectly legal and appropriate. But likewise, as you said, if you know that it's going to be that someone is suggesting a closed session, it's only polite and good to have it on the agenda so everybody can anticipate it, and it might say potential closed session to talk about strategy on litigation. Yes?
Immigration Canyon, you said a two-thirds vote for 5-member council, that would be 4 votes?
Yes, unless only 4 of you are there, then it's 3. Okay, let me just end on the Open and Public Meetings Act. You can read the stuff in the book and that. It's important. It's important for a couple of reasons. First, it's the policy of the state of Utah. Second, if you purposely violated it, it can be a crime. Now, I don't know anybody that's ever been actually charged with it, but I do know the press will beat you up and you'd wish you'd been charged and sent to jail. As opposed to the way you can be accused of hiding everything on it. So follow the Open and Public Meetings Act. If you do something, if you take final action on a matter that's not on the agenda, it is voidable. If someone brings a challenge within 90 days after it's passed, it can be thrown out. If no one brings that challenge within 90 days, then it's too late after that. So those of you who just newly got elected, who hate some decision that happened last year, and you think, aha, it wasn't properly on the agenda, we don't have to follow that. Too late. No one challenged it in 90 days. Don't bring it up. Yes?
I'm wondering if the closed session information is confidential.
Good question. She's wondering if the closed session information is confidential, which leads us right into my last topic, since I'm eating into other people's time now, which is the Ethics Act. The information in the closed session is classified under GRAMA as protected. That means it's confidential. That means if you learn about it in the closed session, you should not, without the permission of the council, be revealing it or discussing it. If you do, in my opinion, you violated the Utah Public Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act. All of you are subject to the Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act now. It covers all officers, elected officials, employees of your municipality, no matter what kind of municipality. It does two things. First, it creates crimes that you can now commit that you couldn't have committed before taking office. Congratulations. There's a whole new class of conduct that you can be thrown in jail for. The second thing it does is it sets a minimum standard of conflict of interest disclosure. These are the crimes, and it goes right to your question that you can commit. It is a crime if you disclose private, protected, controlled information to someone who isn't entitled to have it, information that you got by reason of your position, if you disclose it for their benefit or your personal benefit. It can be a crime. It is a crime to use your position to obtain special privileges for yourself or others. It is a crime to sell your vote, to take anything other than a campaign contribution or something of value less than $50 that isn't money. No gifts, no lobbying. The legislature has made it a crime for you to be lobbied in the same way that they allow themselves to be lobbied. They can be trusted to go to a jazz game with a banker. You can't. You're too subject to the influence. So it's very simple. You go into a closed meeting. This is a real example. They're discussing strategy on obtaining some property. You want to widen the road. And you go in the closed meeting and you say, look, we got an appraisal here. This lot's going to cost us $100,000. Appraises for $100,000. The lawyer says if we have to condemn, it might add 20% to that. It's $100,000. So I think what we ought to do is go in, offer $80,000. If they come back at $100,000, take it. If they come back at anything less than $125,000, maybe we'll take it. And everybody says, oh, a good idea, and authorizes city manager to go start negotiations. And you think to yourself, the guy that owns that property is my neighbor. Somebody ought to tell him not to take that first offer. I mean, how would I feel knowing that all he's got to do is say no to the 80 and he gets 100? How do I feel if he says no to 100, he might get 120? Someone ought to whisper that in his ear. That's only fair. You do that, and you have taken your position as council where you represent the whole city and given information to somebody so that they can benefit where you weren't authorized to. It will be a crime. Yes?
Can we talk about the noticing of public meetings? If there's like an emergency situation.
Emergency meetings. The minimum notice of public meetings, 24 hours. Notice an agenda. The exception is an emergency. Emergency, you do the best practical notice that you have. Emergency means this. The landslide is falling, the fire is raging, the flood is coming. It is not an emergency that you forgot to put it on the agenda. That's a stupid mistake. It is not an emergency unless it's a real emergency. Yes?
So if there's like a temporary restraining order imminent or something like that that we need to address as a council, is that technically an emergency?
Well, it could be, but I can't imagine why a temporary restraining order would need a council decision. But It's fire raging flood. Back to the Ethics Act. Okay, it's very easy. You don't sell your vote, you don't tell secrets, you don't line your own pocket. Any questions about that? Yes.
You just mentioned the example of the jazz game with the banker. I'm trying to figure out where that line is, because I happen to have a very good friend who's a president of the bank who has season tickets to the Utes, and sometimes his wife doesn't want to go and he invites me.
It's all right. I will give you the line. True story. I got a call from a city manager one day and he said this, Dave, I have a question. I have been invited to a jazz game by a banker. And I said, how wonderful to have friends like that. And he said, I don't know the guy from Adam. He's not my friend. I said, well, why did he invite you? Well, he's with Zions. We got our money in Wells Fargo. I'm the guy that makes the decision on this money stuff. I said, well, that's a problem. You know, it's not a social thing. He's inviting you because you're the city manager, and he's inviting you because he wants to talk about banking. Meets that criteria. And then I said, is it worth more than $50? What's the ticket price? He said, oh, these are good seats. You know, these are right next door in Hatch. This is right next to the President of the Senate. You know, I can hear Jerry Sloan swear from these seats, you know. I can see the sweat glisten. I said, well, that's worth more than $50. It meets the criteria. You're being asked because of your public position. It's meant to influence you in your public position. It's worth more than $50. No, you can't go. And then I said, by the way, who are they playing? They said, Charlotte Bobcats. I had said, hell, that's not worth more than $50. Go. But your question is, where is the line drawn? Your friend invites you as a friend, no problem. If your friend invites you because you get to make the decision on which bank to use, problem. Pretty simple. By the way, I have Ute season tickets. There's not a player on the Ute team that is worth what they're charging me for that Diet Coke this year. 32-ounce Diet Coke costs $5 at the U now. Jeez, that's more than Disneyland. All right, conflicts of interest. We are required to disclose conflicts of interest. This is the way the disclosure goes. When you get elected, you file a disclosure sheet with your city that lays out your conflicts. When the conflict becomes current, when it comes up in the meeting, you make an oral disclosure of your conflicts. These are your defined conflicts of interest in the statute. If you own a business that does business with your community, it can be a conflict. If your family, and by the way, when I say you on this, it means close family as well, wife, father, kids. If you own a business that does business with the community, it can be a conflict. If you own a business that is regulated by your community, you got to disclose that conflict. If you have other personal conflicts of interest, the statute says, which conflict with your public duties, you disclose them. Now we've got a question here that I've been ignoring.
This is back on communications. I'm from Kaysville.
Oh, in Kaysville, they have a wonderful YouTube channel.
So on the public communications outside of it, instead of email, if we move to another form of communication within our city for managers, be it Slack or GitHub or something that we could make public that people could come look at, would that be?
Anything you make public is no problem at all. If it's electronic communication outside your meeting, it doesn't meet the definition. The key on electronic communication for all of you is this. Let me just say this. You will know if you're cheating. You will know if you're deciding outside the meeting as a group. You will know if you're deliberating outside the meeting. Don't cheat. You can't accidentally cheat in the electronic communications. But it gives lots of room for purposely cheating. Don't do it. You will get caught. You will get attacked in the press, and the public will think that you're hiding things and all that. And it's going to come back to bite you. So just don't do it. So if you can make it public, make it public. It's no problem with that. Yes?
Disclosure sheet, like a form?
Yeah, if you look in your back of your book, there's a simple form. Many of your communities will have a form. You fill it out, you swear to it, you give it. Yes?
I'm a council staff more often. I had a council member ask me if it's a conflict of interest for them to vote own salaries?
Yeah, good question. No, it isn't. Okay, now, but the question that goes to voting. Once you, the law in Utah is this. We declare our conflicts. It's a minimum standard. Once you declare the conflicts, there's nothing in the law that says that you cannot discuss and vote. That's up to you. That's up to your own moral judgment. That's up to your own standards. You can have a tougher conflicts of interest ordinance in your community if you want. But the state law, Municipal Officers and Employees Ethics Act, does not require you to recuse yourself or require you not to vote once you declare your conflict of interest. Yes?
So lots of us have served on nonprofit boards or different boards or councils within our city that's not city council. If a vote comes up that is in regards to something that we formerly served on, may have, you know, a place in our heart for it.
That's those other, yes, that's that other personal conflict of interest that only you will know about. So let's say, yeah, you serve on another board, you were on the Arts Council, you're sitting there at the meeting, and there's Arts Council request for a big grant of money in this year's budget. And you might say, I would just like to disclose that the Arts Council is dear to my heart. I used to serve on the board, and some may see this as a conflict of interest. I want to let people know where I stand. I'm declaring this conflict. I used to be on this Arts Council board. And then the item comes up for vote. You choose whether you vote or don't vote. Now, many people, many cities have adopted ordinances tougher than that. I know of one city that says, if the state law requires you to disclose the conflict, then our ordinance says you may not vote unless the rest of the council votes to allow you to participate. You can have an ordinance like that if you want it. Without that kind of ordinance, it's completely unfair for you to say to other people, you have a conflict, don't vote. If you're willing to accuse your friend and neighbor of having a conflict of interest just to keep them from voting against your position, perhaps you care so much about the issue that you shouldn't be voting either. That's a mean thing to do. Yes, sir?
What about abstaining to vote when you don't have a conflict?
Good question. What about abstaining to vote when you don't have a conflict? Why would anybody abstain to vote? You got elected to vote. Sometimes you get tough decisions. Sometimes there are cowards in the room. Sometimes you just want to force the mayor to vote to see where they are. Don't do it. If you're in the room, I instruct people to count your vote as a no vote. If you want to abstain to force the mayor to vote, get up, walk out, and be absent. If you are in the room, you ought to vote. And most of you will have policies and procedures that says, if they're there, we're counting the yes votes, and every other vote for a council member there will be treated as a no. Because legally, all that matters is the yes votes, except on the issue of, is this a tie or not a tie? And it's completely unfair to be in a situation in a 6-member council where 2 council members vote yes, 2 council members vote no, and 1 council member says, I abstain. Let's see where the mayor is on this issue. If I'm the mayor there, I'd say, matter fails, 2 in favor, 3 against. Unless, of course, I'm the mayor and in favor of it, and then I say, I declare this as a tie, 2 in favor, 2 against, 1 absence, it's a tie, I'm voting, it passes. So you can see why it's a dumb thing to abstain. It leaves that ambiguity. I'm out of time. I've been cutting into other people's time. This is a good group. I appreciate your questions. As Cameron says, whether I'm your attorney or not your attorney, I am the league's attorney. You can call me anytime and I'll attempt to answer your question. If you call me from Ann Romney's city there and you don't tell me that she's already given you an opinion that you want me to second guess, I'm going to be really mad. I don't want to be called to second guess your own attorney's opinions. I don't want to be called because you've sought advice from another attorney and you think they're wrong. I want to be called because you've got a question that I can honestly help you answer that. But I'm going to take your call or your email. I'm going to try to answer your questions because, you know, what else have I got to do besides play golf and fish? And who would want to do that rather than talk to David Taylor from Fairview? But anyway, let me tell you this just in ending. The role that you've chosen for yourself is really important. It's important, as I said, for a couple of reasons. You are in charge of taking care of these 60,000 new people, this new city of Layton that comes in every year. No one else is going to do it if you don't do it. And you don't have a choice now that you're elected. You're going to have to deal with it. Now, if you're from Millard County or Paiute County, they don't have growth problems, they lost population. But if you're representing a city along the Wasatch Front, you're going to be faced with growth issues, and the government that is in charge of that is you. You're going to bring the clean water to their houses and take the dirty water away. You're going to make sure that the 911 call's answered. You're going to quiet the barking dogs. It's a wonderful thing that you've chosen to do. Take it seriously. Local government is the most intrusive government, and it's the most coercive government. So wield your power carefully. We're lots more coercive and intrusive than the state government and the federal government. And so be careful with what you do. Focus on the services, focus on building your communities, and you'll enjoy it, and the people will honor you, if not with re-election, with a plaque. So thank you very much. He just said that they're granted us additional time to answer questions on things if you have them. If not, I only ended because the men over 50 all started to look real nervous and start heading there. But any other questions, you've got them. If not, we're taking a break.
Dave.
Yes.
Oakley City. So a lot of closed meetings when you're talking about we're working on a trail project and stuff like that. If you have a closed meeting and you're doing it and you have a subcommittee of community people saying, well, what's going on that, and you want to keep the council totally involved in it at that, I mean, it deals with leasing or different ways to establish a trail. Is that something that once that's discussed that you can't talk to the subcommittee that's looking at it, or because there's always going to be interested parties that you're going to be bringing in, not in a closed meeting situation?
Just remember, the law trades transparency for efficiency. And so if it's not one of those things that you can legally close a meeting for, and you've got the public body doing it, you got to do it in a public meeting. If you don't have the public body doing it, if it's a subcommittee of one council member or somebody to do it, then the different laws apply on that. But yeah, you've identified the right thing. If you hold that closed meeting and it's secret information, then you may not, without the council's permission, share that with that outside group. But with the council's permission, you could.
And sometimes that outside group will be within.
Exactly. You can share information that's generated in a closed meeting can be made public with the consent of the group that closed the meeting, to whoever they want to make it to, public to. Yes?
Can you talk about motions in a closed meeting?
Yes, the question is about motions in a closed meeting, and that's a real good question because there are some things the law says you may not decide to do in a closed meeting. Those things is you can't approve a contract, pass an ordinance, appoint an official to a position. You can't take those votes in a closed meeting. That means there are some things that you are going to decide in a closed meeting. So there is a myth out there that you can't make a motion in a closed meeting. So we do this kind of, what is it, kabuki theater dance where you pretending that you're not making a motion but you discuss. You will decide in a closed meeting strategy on litigation. You will decide in a closed meeting how to handle the personnel thing. You will decide in a closed meeting what to offer on property and what not to offer on property. So the equivalent of a vote and a motion or whatever will be taken in a closed meeting. But you may not in the closed meeting approve the final contract. You may not in a closed meeting pass ordinances or approve contracts or things like that. Does that make sense? But effectively you are making motions and votes in closed meetings. Yes?
Vineyard. So in codes and in this book I've read where it says the mayor can do something through advice and consent of the council. Can you define what that means?
Yeah, advice means the mayor says, I intend to do this, and you say, boy, that's a dumb idea. And consent means they say, may I still do it? And they take a vote. That's all it means. It's just like the president of the Supreme Court thing. It doesn't mean that you get to substitute your appointment for theirs. It means you get to veto theirs. Yes?
What can you do by consent agenda?
What can you do by consent agenda brings up another interesting question. What you cannot do by consent agenda is approve an ordinance, a bond, a contract. There are some things that the state code says requires a roll call vote of the council. That includes creating a debt, passing an ordinance, almost anything else you could do by a consent agenda, depending on your own internal rules of procedure. You are required, and probably have, whether you know it or not, to have adopted rules of procedure for your council's conduct of their meetings. Those rules should cover things like consent agendas, how you get things on the agenda, whether you're following Robert's Rules of Order or some other rules of order. You can create whatever rules you want for your group and committee. But the state law requires a roll call vote on certain minimum things. So they can't be on the consent agenda because there wouldn't be a roll call on those. Other questions? See, I knew they did enough. Look at that. Half the room standing out there in the hall doing something. Probably a secret meeting. Thank you very much.